Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto ran away from Konoha 6 years ago and became Emperor Lion of the West Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Konoha's delegates stood just there, as they've heard the Emperor of the Second Numenor Empire, a man that has built the biggest empire and nation this world has ever seen, in just 5 years' time. He was a man of legend, someone, before whom they came to ask for his support and for him to lend his strength to them, so that land of fire could expand, for will of fire to take root in all of elemental nations. And after hearing that Naruto and his friends were actually in the empire, and have taken up the positions of power, hopes were lifted for Konoha, who had expected that they would help out their home, in hopes of returning there. Minato had believed that his own son, who would be ecstatic to see his real family alive and well, would be more than happy to assist him. Konoha has made grand plans of exploiting the empire for their own needs, forgetting that the rulers of the said empire may not be as gullible as easy to trick as they may think. They had thought that the emperor will be on their side instantly, helping the noble and just cause of Konoha, assisting the legendary Yellow Flash and 4th Hokage in his trials. They were wrong, for the man that now sat on the imperial throne, the man that had forged this land of kingdoms, principalities, tribes and nations, constantly warring with one another, into the mightiest and most powerful empire this man has known, he was a man that knew of Konoha and its deep-rooted and hidden agendas all too well. After all, he himself once was a part in their schemes and plots, one that was discarded having long served its purpose, forgotten forever, assumed to have completely expired beyond his original purpose. And even when Konoha had heard of him again, they believed that he would have forgotten and forgiven them, and would play a part in their grand plans, also that he could return back to Konoha, as Minato, his wife, children and everyone else thought. But Naruto Pendragon, adopted son of Uther Pendragon, titled Lightbringer, Emperor of Second Numenor Empire and Lion of the West, did not forget anything, and he forgiven nothing to Konoha. 10 years have passed since his exile, since he was simply thrown away like a trash, and now this same trash was the man these people came to ask for an alliance and help. And they thought that he would simply give it to them, like that. Well, they were in for quite a surprise, since Naruto was no longer that gullible loud idiot, but a man of great power, with greatest of responsibilities of making his empire prosper, protect its inhabitants and the kingdoms he is charged with defending. He was now the most powerful man in the world, and in all right, he could have simply expelled Konoha out of here, invaded their lands and destroyed the Hai no Kuni. Hell, his own Shadow Guard and Watchers, a special night elven organization, tasked with internal protection of the empire, could have destroyed Konoha within a matter of weeks. However, Naruto didn't do it, not because he was merciful, or because he had forgiven them, no. It was simply now beneath him, not even worthy of his attention and resources to spare, not when he had far more important issues and business to deal with, like with Westerosi kingdoms and their drunken king of 5 kingdoms, previous of 7 kingdoms, or the raiders from Iron Islands, that pillaged coastlines from Reach to Arati Plains, and not to mention the Ogre Empire in far southeast, Konoha and its problems weren't even worthy of a second thought to Naruto now. But now, with his own family, former friends, mentors and even the elders coming right here before him, now Naruto had time for them, and he actually reveled a little bit in this small fact, an acknowledgement of his importance, since it was Konoha itself that had come all the way here to seek his help. This brought a little warm satisfying feeling inside his heart, but he didn't allow it to fester any more than he already had. He needed to be reasonable, practical and think of every factor in these talks. After all, he was the emperor of Numenor Empire, and one that first put the well-being and successful prosperity of his empire before his own vengeance. But still, another small jolt of satisfaction came to him, as he observed the reaction these people. He has changed, completely and without looking back, having abandoned the ways of shinobi and embraced the way of a warrior and light, like his adopted father. He was taller than his blood father and Jiraiya, with more muscles than both of them combined, and Guy would be jealous of. Whiskers and spikiness in hair were gone, as well as all of baby fat, but a couple of small scars were added up in their place, one over his left brow, and the other on his right jaw. He wore full plate armor and wielded an ancient and powerful elven sword of Charlemagne, gifted to him by the king of high elves. He was a military commander and powerful politician, shrewd and cunning, a diplomat when needed, and a warrior when must. He no longer was that loud-mouthed genin who wanted to be a Hokage, for now he was the emperor. Konoha's delegates and shinobi all were looking at Naruto with various looks and emotions, ranging from utter shock and confusion by Minato, Kakashi, Jiraiya, Shikamaru, Asuma and Kurenai, with hopes and tears by Kushina, and the most prominent, envy, anger, jealousy and hatred by Sasuke, Menma, Narumi, Ino, Sakura, elders, Danzo and daimyo's officials. All of them did not expect to see someone whom they saw as the failure and expired instrument now become the one before whom they were forced to prostrate themselves. Many found it unbearable, while some seemed to think in their deluded minds that this was even better, like one Minato, who spoke in a hopeful manner. Naruto, my son, how much you have grown, and Minato, having heard Naruto address him as father, was filled with hopes that he would be successful in swaying his emperor son on his side, but he was wrong. Minato Namikaze, in case your eyes fail you, allow me to remind you that you stand in a presence of His Imperial Majesty, a person in status and power far outclassing all of you here. Hanabi didn't miss an opportunity to remind Konoha of their place. Unless you and the rest of your entourage to be educated in court's etiquette and tact, then you shall remember your position here. His Imperial Majesty, though have addressed you as father, merely acknowledges already a well-known and commonly known fact, that you are his blood parent, nothing more and less. Lady Hanabi speaks true, though since we are merciful, we will forgive this minor mistake. After all, it is our first meeting in 25 years now. Naruto simply said in powerful and authoritarian manner, catching a look of small shock in Minato's eyes, as well as some others. Back then, I was but a newly born child, left by you and your wife here in Konoha, for a cold-hearted and practical purpose, one that I had completed, and was disposed of. Sochi, please, you have to. Kushina had tried to talk, but she was suddenly pulled down to the ground by adamantine chains, much like her own, only these were even of greater power than hers, forcing her to bend before Naruto, denying her to look him in the eye. Kushina Namikaze, you have been given a clear warning of how to address His Imperial Majesty. And considering how you and your husband have handled him, I believe that everyone here agrees with me when I say, that you and this man you call your husband do know to have the right to call him your son. Kushina had recognized the voice, as she looked up and saw a beautiful, younger version of her mother, with red eyes, crimson hair and dressed in vibrant red and golden fully closed dress, with chains extending from her arm. And as a matter of a fact, you and your children here have no right of being called Uzumaki. Kushina paled at a shock, while her son wasn't going to listen to that slighting of him and his family. Who the hell do you think you are? We are the true Uzumaki, and you are nothing more than. Menma was about to say his piece, but he was suddenly silenced when his frame hit the floor, hard, as the magical powers pulled him downwards, casted by a young girl, a near-perfect copy of the Uzumaki head. Shut your mouth, runt. You address Lady Kaoru Uzumaki Uchiha, Lady of Kai and Kyotai, leader of Uzumaki clan, chosen by her people and the official representative of Uzumaki and Uchiha in Numenor. Address her with a proper respect, and if you slight her, I will personally make you regret you ever raising your voice against my lady mother. She said with clear hatred and spite towards Menma and Kushina. Your daughter's fierce loyalty and desire to protect your honor are an impressive sight to behold, Lady Kaoru. Samiramis complimented them, motioning them to stop, before she turned her attention back to Konoha's delegates. Lord Hokage, for your sakes, restrain your family members and the rest of your entourage from any further accidents. We are willing to listen to what you have to say and give thought to it, but our patience and benevolence are not infinite. Another such act of insult, and the ones who incurred it will suffer, as will you personally. Samiramis, much like her imperial husband, wasn't going to let Konoha just act like they were in charge here. Oh, of course, your imperial majesty. I ask for your forgiveness, and there will be no further incidents. Minato quickly gathered his own composure, as did most of the others, save for Sasuke, Kiba and Sakura, who kept glaring at him. If there won't be any slights like that, then you are free to state your business to us in our court. I may have missed the beginning, but I believe that you have come here to ask for something. Naruto noted out, as his put his sword on his right side, holding by the tip of the hilt. So, what message did Fire Daimyo instruct you to carry here? Our Lord Daimyo has sent us with a proposition to your Imperial Majesty. Koharu decided to speak in Minato's place, with Naruto and everyone else carefully listening. Our daimyo wishes to establish strong diplomatic ties with your empire, so that both of our countries could prosper and grow stronger from one another. My empire has been growing strong and prosperous ever since it has been established 5 years ago, without any aid or help from your country. Naruto noted out to the elder. And so far its growth in prosperity and power has been quite successful, and I see no need to alter an already successful and proven growth pattern. Yes, your Imperial Majesty, that may be true, but I am sure you are aware of the inner strength that Hai no Kuni possesses. The will of fire, a legacy of the first Hokage and carried by all of shinobi of Konoha and its people. Minato reminded to Naruto, who merely cocked his eyebrow up. This will of fire has been the source of power to Konoha in its direst of moments and in its greatest victories. As once a shinobi yourself, your Imperial Majesty, you know the true strength of will of fire. Lord Hokage, the will of fire you speak of is a philosophical teaching, a spiritual guidance at its core, nothing more. Philosophy is good for mental and spiritual growth and is capable of uniting people, but here in the Empire, people believe not just in ideals, but in actions that make those ideals into a reality. Naruto stated with knowledge, with Minato stiffening at hearing his son say it like that. I will not debate on which philosophy or teaching is more worthy of following or not, that is a task for philosophers and scholars. Now, what is it that Fire Daimyo proposes exactly, aside from demonstrating our court your spiritual knowledge? And do please operate with physical and real objects, not spiritualistic ones. Our empire has its own ideological and mental values, values that we do not intend to change to any others, just because of your example. Samiramis noted out to them. If you wish to establish diplomatic ties without empire, do so through actions, not high and mighty words. Daimyos of Odo, Iwa and Kumo, for an example, have proven themselves as valuable and trustworthy economic and trading partners through their actions. Hai no Kuni and Konoha may would want to learn from their example. Samiramis contained a wish to laugh at the look of insult upon Konoha shinobi's faces, while ambassadors and guests from said countries smirked at them. Our daimyo wishes for an embassy to be established in your empire, as to have an official representation of Hai no Kuni's interests in your court. Elder Homura spoke up now. He also proposes for an alliance to be made between your empire and Hai no Kuni, an economic and military in nature. In exchange of your fleet and armies supporting our daimyo, you will have access to Konoha's shinobi to hire as your guards, assassins and assistants in various situations. Along with that, we are willing to trade our knowledge of elemental natures, chakra and jutsu as well. There are also other propositions and some details that need to be fulfilled, but I am sure that a man of your status needs not to bother with the minor details. Counselor Homura, in my experience, it is such minor details, as you have called them, that later cause most trouble and prove to be far more detrimental than the entire treaty is worth. Naruto sternly replied to her, with steel in his voice. My husband and I will want to hear it all now, everything that you want to offer to us, as well as details surrounding them, no matter how minor they are. Empress added up with a demand. Unless you have something to hide from us, you should have no trouble revealing it all to us. And along with that, I believe that you also have a documented version of the proposition of your daimyo. If you have it, please give it to High Lord Gabriel Windrunner. Gabriel understood what was needed of him, so he left his position and went to the officials of daimyo, picking up the treaty and already beginning to read it, as he went back. After a good several minutes of reading it, confusion on Gabriel's face has changed into mild irritation and then into a hidden anger, traces of which appeared upon his face. When he was done reading it all, he handed it over to Hanabi, surprising Naruto and Samiramis, before he spoke up, while Konoha awaited the response from the Empire's highest authority here, already expecting a success. Forgive me, your Imperial Majesties, but I cannot present to you the terms of Konoha's treaty, without using strong and inappropriate words, especially in presence of noble ladies, Her Imperial Majesty, and my wife. Gabriel explained himself, with Naruto and Samiramis understanding that Konoha's proposition was far more of a demand, instead of a proposition of friendship and trade, while Windrunner turned to face them. Delegates of Konoha, what exactly were you hoping to accomplish with those terms? Did you think that just because our empire is young it can be easily swayed by someone like you into doing your bidding for essentially nothing? By the tone, Gabriel was completely infuriated and for a good reason. Lady Hanabi, what is it that has infuriated Hand of the Emperor so much? What is written there? Samiramis asked of the head of diplomatic affairs, growing impatient herself with Naruto as well. Lady Hanabi quickly went through the document and much like her close friend, was growing angrier with Konoha's proposal by the second. Once she was done, she let out a sharp and long exhale, a sign of her own anger and frustration, before she spoke to the imperial couple. Your Imperial Majesties, High no Kuni's terms of proposal are as follow. Establishment of an embassy and constant diplomatic presence in Empire. Opening all of its ports to our merchant ships and lowering of taxation on our merchants and their goods. Ability to contract Konoha shinobi. Provision of knowledge on jutsu, chakra and elemental manipulations. An official military and economic alliance between our empire and High no Kuni. Hanabi took a pause for a second, before continuing on. However, in exchange for these offerings, Konoha and Fire Daimyo demand abolishment of all and any connections to lands of Iwa, Kumo and Oto. Immediate closure of their embassies and banishment of their ambassadors and any and all members of their countries. Seizure of humanitarian help for said lands and their complete redirection to High no Kuni to combat the effects of the Great Famine. 1/5 of our fleet is to be stationed in their territorial waters, for protection of their merchant and civilian fleet. 1/4 of our armed forces are to be deployed in elemental nations to guard its borders. Complete access to usage of our specialized forces, such as Shadow Guard, in Konoha's interests. Provision of our military and industrial technologies, as well as schematics and experts on building them. And immediate oath to assist Konoha and High no Kuni in case they go to war, be they the defendant or the aggressor. Hanabi could see how her husband understood what had infuriated her and Gabriel so much. These are the terms that Konoha and High no Kuni has given to us. Hanabi gave terms to her emperor and empress, with the court clearly hearing them all, and outrage broke out, as the court descended into fury and rage. Konoha's delegations suddenly found themselves as the objects of combined hatred and fury of the imperial court, as nobles of all races, ambassadors from elemental nations and other lands were scoffing and scowling at them. Minato and Kushina saw clear hatred and fury of the court at them, and did not understand what was so outrageous that they have proposed to them. These were the very same terms that Konoha had given to each and every other nation that had joined them, and even though some of them did refuse them, they eventually did see the power of Will of Fire and joined in. But here, imperial nobility, ambassadors and all others, they simply scoffed at them all and spoke out in outrage and fury towards them. It seemed like Empire wasn't intimidated and impressed by power of Konoha, but seemed to completely scoff at it and them as well. Naruto and Samiramis remained composed, but a single look at them revealed their own distress and inner anger. And all the while most of Konoha struggled to remain composed in the face of this outcry, Danzo already was making his move, as he subtly activated his Mangekyo Sharingan and was ready to secure this empire for Konoha. After all, if this young fool wasn't going to serve willingly to Konoha's best interests, he shall be made to do so through a little bit of persuasion. After all, if not for Konoha, for whom this empire's resources and vast armies were for? These fools? No, only for Konoha and none others. Having listened and allowed the outrageous cries continue for long enough, Naruto raised his blade for a little bit, before he sent it down back with the tip colliding with the white floor of the throne room. The sound, and instant near invisible wave of wind and power hushed the court and throne room fell silent. They knew that now Emperor and Empress have made their decision and will announce it, and now was the time for them to remain silent and patient. Naruto looked down at his parents, elders, Konoha shinobi and officials of daimyo, anger and fury barely visible upon his face. He had expected Konoha to be at least politely humble and subtle, but this. He had heard less outrageous terms from Robert Baratheon and his wife, when he invaded Reach and Dorne. Naruto had faced many arrogant and ignorant rulers, counts, dukes and sovereigns, many of whom had demanded of him a lot of things, but to hear such things from Konoha and Hai no Kuni, at the first official diplomatic mission and meeting like that, it would seem they have completely lost all sense of fear and respect towards others. Well, time to remind these arrogant shinobi, that there are those, whom you must fear and respect. Lord Hokage, elders and ambassadors, I have but one question to ask of you, who do you think you are? Naruto asked of them, his voice layer with steel, cold and unforgiving, but with core of anger present in it. Your Imperial Majesty, if you are confused, then we can, Jiraiya, thinking that his former apprentice didn't understand the meaning of this offer, made a single biggest mistake. Confused. Naruto roared at them, with the court and throne room unconsciously shaking in fear for a moment at the power of their emperor. You take me for a fool, Jiraiya of Toads? Or do you think that I am the same naive foolish loud-mouthed student you had toyed with 10 years ago? Do not try to appease or deceive me, I have been fooled far too many times to fall for such lies again, and be thankful that I had not ordered for your incarceration for these words. Now, answer the question, or I will have it pried out of your mouths by other means. The tone at which Naruto had said it made it crystal clear that he was deadly serious, while royal guards had put their hands upon their weapons, ready and waiting for the command. Your Imperial Majesty, our land is the strongest in elemental nations, with our shinobi and warriors being of greater quality and strength than all others. Minato took the word, speaking up with conviction. This treaty is the same one that we have granted to Suna, Kiri and many others, and they had accepted it, not to mention now are a part of our union. Your nation would greatly benefit from this alliance and benefit from it. In what way? Lowered trading taxes and opening more ports in your lands, or through learning what chakra and elemental natures are. Do not take me for a fool, Hokage. Naruto warned him with strength. Do you think that learning what we already know from Uchihas, Uzumaki and others is of any worth to us? Or that 6 new ports and lowered taxations will make up for the economic losses in severing the trade with 2 biggest importers of rich ores, metals and building materials on your continent? And do you think that we would ever commit a great portion of our fleets, armies and our specialized troops, just for your shinobi, who are 1,000 miles away from the closest port in my empire? Naruto roared at them in that last one, with even Samiramis flinching a little at this one, which was something rarely seen even by her own kin. Why, your Imperial Majesty, perhaps a more detailed and private explanation of RT terms would see clarify some. Minato had tried to play his hand on this one, to get a chance to personally talk to Naruto and explain everything to him, to get him see his way, but it was far too late. In public or in private, our answer will be the one and the same, Minato Namikaze. Naruto said with power, as he and his wife rose up from their seats and walked closer to the court. This empire, this nation was founded in flames of war, where rivers of blood flew on hundreds of battlefields and countless lives were lost on daily basis, all in the name of few and their greed, arrogance and lust for power. They would betray the lives of their men and women, friends and loyal retainers in a matter of seconds, just to gain momentary profit and small measure of questionable valuables. I have taken a sacred vow before you all, that I would make those days perish and to have this empire standing as a beacon of justice, loyalty and righteousness, where loyalty is rewarded, and traitors are sought and punished. Naruto looked at Sasuke, who was still seething with hatred, while most of Konoha trembled. And now, Daimyo of High no Kuni has sent you, Konoha shinobi, here, in hopes that I would make the same choice as all those other kings, lords and sovereigns before me. He believes that I would be willing to give up long-forged partnerships and friendships with more honest and honorable rulers, and that I would send sons and daughters of this empire just to die for a foreign ruler and his ambitions. Well, Konoha, you may return to your liege lord and inform him that Second Numenor Empire will never agree to the terms he has presented, not today, in 5, 10 or 100 years. We will never ally ourselves with the man that rewards traitors, and punishes those who are loyal and righteous to the cause. And for this insult, in assuming that we would reject our partners for him, by imperial decree, I order the complete withdrawal of Phoenix Trading Company and its assets from High no Kuni and their so-called allies. Naruto turned to the president of the Phoenix Company, a high elf with short black hair and dressed in black and red, and ambassadors from Northern Alliance. Lord Halen, any and all monetary and physical losses during the withdrawal will be compensated from Royal Treasury. You have my word on that. I need no further guarantees, Your Imperial Majesty. Phoenix Trading Company shall withdraw our merchants, trading posts and all our assets within 3 weeks, as per your command. High Elf bowed before his Emperor and Empress. Ambassadors Lao, Kei and Yakushi, I remember the offer of expanding trading relations between our respectable nations, as well as opening a permanent trading office and representation of Phoenix Trading Company. We are open to further negotiations on this matter, so contact with Lady Hanabi and Lord Halen, so that we may discuss this matter in full details. Naruto saw how the ambassadors beamed with success and bowed before the Emperor and Empress. Naruto, what the hell are you doing? Jiraiya, having had enough, decided that it was enough time for the politeness, and decided to make it personal. You would so openly forsake your home in times of need, and ally yourself with them. Don't you know that they are allies and minions of Orochimaru, and you would openly help them like that? This is an outrage, you. Sir Arthur Dane, Sir Alaric Redsun, take this man, gag him and escort him out of here. Old Toad Sage clearly has forgotten his place and needs to be reminded of it, so please be kind as to introduce him to Lady Maev Shadowsong and her watchers, as well as the cells. 2 days within those confines should teach this man and serve as an example to his companions for what will happen, if they decide to insult my husband and our family without care. Samiramis commanded to the royal guards, with a tall man with 2 swords in full armor and a high elf, dressed in paladin armor and with a war hammer of dwarven work, turned around and bowed the Empress, before heading towards the man. Jiraiya had tried to resist the arrest, even trying to fight against the 2 royal guards, but they weren't chosen of the Emperor and Empress without a reason. A single spell of light from Alaric, and Jiraiya found his knees failing him and falling onto the ground, as special shackles closed up on his wrists and he was dragged out of the room, with Konoha's shinobi looking at this with an outrage, but also fear. As Jiraiya was out of the room and the royal guards quickly rejoined them, Naruto spoke up again. Another outrageous act upon your part, delegates, and fate of your companion will be a mercy compared to the next punishment. Naruto promised them, You and your guards are restricted to the port quarter and you will be under constant monitoring of watchers and city guards. Should you try and leave, you will be escorted back. Try a second time and you will be escorted into the gallows. Force your way, and you will leave the port quarter in a coffin. You will leave Numenor City in 4 days, with the next ship heading for Hai no Kuni. Now, be gone, your audience is over. Naruto commanded to them. I believe you should reconsider this rash decision, your Imperial Majesty. Danzo spoke in his usual manner, getting an eye contact with Naruto and using his Kotoamatsukami on him in that same instant. After all, you do care for the betterment of Konoha, Naruto Uzumaki, do you not? Danzo let out a small satisfied smile, knowing that this empire was as good as his now, with Naruto blinking a couple of times, as if something was in his eyes. Unfortunately for Danzo, he has greatly underestimated empire and its emperor, along with people that has surrounded himself with. While in Eastern continent, only select few could feel how a person casts a jutsu or genjutsu. In the West, magi, shinobi, watchers and many others have developed several supplementary techniques that allowed to sense out the casting of a spell, jutsu or a visual genjutsu of the highest caliber. What is on the East a hidden genjutsu technique, was like a thundering monastery bell for all of royal guards, noble lords and ladies, hidden watchers and shadow guards, along with emperor and empress, and their bodyguards. Royal guards immediately drew out their weapons, as the city guards in the throne room also took up the positions for a battle, shielding the court. Neji and Tenten instantly were at Empress' and Emperor's sides, with Gabriel and Verisa already drawing out their weapons. Samiramis instantly understood what befell her husband and dispelled the genjutsu the second she sensed it, much to Danzo's shock, while all of Konoha was oblivious and didn't understand what was going on. Naruto, the second he felt the genjutsu lifted off him, looked in concerned eyes of Hanabi and Samiramis, nodding to his empress, signifying that he was well now. The next second, Naruto's furious voice thundered through the halls of palace. You insolent mongrels! You dare not only to insult me and my entire empire with this treaty, but you have the gall to use a genjutsu upon me to bend me to your will. Exclamation mark. Watchers, seize all of Konoha's delegates, have them shackled and thrown into the twilight cells. The next instant the entire delegation of Konoha was surrounded by Heian night elves, dressed in black armor, covering their body and faces, with black cloaks coming to the floor from their shoulder plates, already proceeding to shackle and seize shinobi of Konoha and its ambassadors. And have this war hawk and Sasuke Uchiha interrogated and searched with extreme prejudice, spare no expense or method to get to the truth of this matter. Inform Lady Maev and Anko Mitarashi, that they have full carte blanche on this. Danzo was struggling with the two night elves when they restrained him, but once shackles were placed on him and all of chakra was blocked off him. His bandages were ripped out from his covered eye and his arm, along with restraints on it, revealing the full arm of Sharingans, with face of Hashirama on the shoulder of his artificial arm, and a Sharingan in his right eye socket. Minato and the rest of Konoha looked at Danzo with utter shock and bewilderment, while Sasuke was seething with anger and rage and was trying to get out of the hold of watchers and kill Danzo. Court looked at Danzo with utter disgust and did not even hide it, with sneers, snarls and clear fury upon him and the rest of Konoha. Naruto and Samiramis merely looked at them with fury and contempt, as she motioned to take them away, with Danzo shouting out in outrage that all he did was for Konoha, which sounded as cries of a defeated beast. Unfortunately for everyone, the moment the shackles have closed up on Sakura's wrists, the spell put on her by Hanabi had been dispelled by the effects of the shackles. And the moment that spell was lifted, Sakura shouted out loud. Naruto, you ungrateful bastard! You should have long been dead, and this place belongs to Sasuke-kun by his right of an elite, and you'll be kissing my feet before I bash your skull into nothing. This Empress, Hanabi, all of those bitches will service him, only a shame that ugly fat bitch Hinata was dumb enough to die because of a worthless demon like you and, Sakura shouted out, as she was being dragged out of the throne room, until Wait! Thundering voice of Naruto stopped the watchers and everyone in their track. Bring her here. Naruto commanded slowly and with power, with the watchers knowing who he wanted to see, and they dragged Sakura right before his feet, past the royal guards and put her on her knees before him, as Naruto's face and eyes, filled with utter fury, anger and rage, locked on the now shaking Pinkett. None dare to insult the imperial family, threaten them, and most importantly, no one dares to insult the memory of my beloved and get away from it without being punished. Naruto said with cold, barely contained fury, as he looked in the eyes of the watchers and gave a command. Cut her tongue out of her mouth and cauterize the wound without an anesthetic. Make her watch the interrogation of her beloved Sasuke Uchiha, and after that, make sure that neither her foul mouth, nor her hands are capable of spewing dirt upon others. Sakura paled as she heard her sentence, with one of the watchers promptly gauging her and getting her out of the place, with the rest of the lot. All of court and throne room fell silent for a moment, and none dared to speak against the emperor and his order. They knew that it was cruel, unethical even, but he was fully in his right, and it was not just a sentence for a foul-mouthed woman, no. This was a message, clear as crystal diamond and more powerful than simple words. Naruto was a ruler, a powerful emperor, and one that really did good for his people, having once made Eriador great again, greater than ever before. However, while his heart is kind and intentions are benevolent towards his friends and subjects, to those that seek to undermine his people, exploit his kindness and smirch his and Numenor's name with dirt, he'll be vengeful and merciless. And to those that dare to insult the memory of his beloved wife, a woman revered by people as nothing short of a saint, someone who had given to the unification of this land more than anyone, including her life. Even to this day, after over 5 years now, Naruto still could not forget his beloved Hinata, nor forgive himself for not being there with her. He will forever feel that way, until the day that he reunited with her in the next life or the afterlife. But until that day comes, no one will smirch his wife's name with dirt, nor will anyone dare to use his empire in their own interests. He will not send men and women to die in the others' wars, not for Westerosi lords, nor will he do so for his former home. Especially not his former home. Imperial Palace's dungeons. Twilight Cells section. Several hours later. The Twilight Cells were exactly what they sounded like, embodying the endless void of darkness, so thick and strong, that not even drops of water could get through. Cells made of the black rock, with ebonite-like metal being the material of the cells. Some of the more daring shinobi tried to break out of the cell through either force, or with the lock picks, but to no avail or success, since the Twilight Cells are designed not just to house prisoners, but to prevent their escape by the means of engineering and magic combined, magic that only watchers patrolling the area knew here. And nothing escaped the gazes of those men and women, for they were trained to even see with their eyes closed. It has been a couple of hours, and so far, the watchers already took Sasuke, Danzo, Might Guy, Sakura, Koharu and Homura, with Might Guy, Koharu and Homura returned, but returned in a state that left the prisoners more than a little scared. They seemed hollow, utterly empty. With not as much of a physical damage done as they expected, but it was clear that whatever methods watchers employed, it was more than enough to break even Might Guy, for his form shook with every sudden wisp of rare wind, or crack of a torch. His eyes were filled with dread and utter fear, but his lips were shut, yet it was clear he was broken, and not just once. The Namikaze family was put in a single cell, not much to their surprise, or maybe it was one grace that Naruto would show to them. The cell was clearly made for several prisoners, so there was enough space for them all, but there was no way for them to speak with the other shinobi of Konoha. Letting out a sigh, Kushina spoke up, starting the long-awaited talk. Naruto, not like this I had thought our reunion would come, if it ever were to be. I had hoped, believed like Tsunade that he was still alive, but like this, Minato, what have we done to him? Kushina shook her head, putting it in her hands, weeping. My son, our baby boy, How could we even think about doing such a thing and be okay with it? Kushina cried out at her husband, who didn't even flinch a little. You know as well as I do, Kushina, that this was the best thing for us all to do. It was either that, or we would risk all of our children being targeted by not just Madara, but also by Kumo and Iwa, and not to mention the influence of Kyuubi over them. Minato reminded to his wife and kids what needed to be done, and he still stood by his decision. What do you think would have been better? Having all of our children suffering for our mistake, or be able to raise two of them to be what they were destined to be, in happiness and safety, while the other one were to drive away from us and them all the threats. You and I made that decision and there is no reversing it now. The other one, Minato, that damned bloody decision that you think I made, was made by you, Jiraiya, and that cursed Hiruzen Sarutobi, not me. I was in a damned coma after the childbirth and extraction of Kyuubi, not mention battling Madara. Have you forgotten how you told me that my Naruto had died during the attack, that he took the soul of the Kyuubi with him? Exclamation mark quote. Kushina shouted in outrage at her husband. You knew, that damned frog and that fucking Hokage, all of you knew, that I would never have allowed you to abandon my son, whom I didn't even hold in my hands. You fucking lied to me, and only 14 fucking years later did I find out the truth about my Sochi. You stole away from me my child, our child. And all for fucking what? To protect our children from Madara, Iwa and all others. You are a fucking yellow flash of Konoha, for crying out loud, the man that had killed thousands of shinobi in mere hours. And Konoha is filled with powerful shinobi, all of whom together had stopped the Kyuubi. No, you didn't sacrifice our son just to protect Menma and Narumi. No, I know why you did it, Minato. You know nothing, Kushina. I did it for the betterment of us in Konoha. Minato defended himself before his wife. Oh, for fucking hell, shut up about your betterment of Konoha for a fucking minute. You threw away our son, because you didn't see our son in Naruto anymore. Kushina accused him, with Minato shutting up at this one. You think I never saw that look on your face, when Kyuubi was raging inside of me, that look of fear, mixed with hatred. Oh, I remember it very well, Minato, so well, that just before I fell into coma, the last thing I saw was the very same look of yours, casted right at our baby. And it was far more intense and avid. You didn't see Naruto there, you saw Kyuubi instead of him, that's why you threw him away, didn't you? Minato didn't say a thing, as he continued thinking over this situation and trying to find a way out, as well as not daring to face his wife and the truth. And while their parents were in debates of their own, Narumi and Menma were exchanging words of their own. Damn that Naruto. Who the hell does he think he is? Throwing us like some common criminals into these cells, he should have been glad to finally see his real family, like a failure he is, and sign that damn treaty for all our sakes. Doesn't he understand that Konoha is the only true empire that deserves to rule? Menma asked no one in particular, with Narumi replying. Well, be I on his place, I wouldn't think twice about executing Danzo, and that son of a bitch Sasuke with that whore, Narumi grumbled with anger, as a small chuckle escaped her lips. I so bloody hope that he and that whore suffer, serves that bastard right. Narumi grumbled lowly. Aren't you supposed to be a loyal and loving wife to Sasuke, like you and Sakura usually do? Menma was surprised when he heard his sister speak like that. What? Is being Mrs. Uchiha isn't as good as you had hoped? Is he what? Not giving you enough attention and you resort to vibrators? Are you and Sakura? Menma was about to continue, but a quick slam in the jaw silenced him for good, with Narumi looking at him with hatred. You better shut up, little brother, before I do those tormentors' job on you for them. Narumi hissed at him, with blazing hatred in her eyes. You think that being married is all sunshine and happiness. For you, maybe, but for me, I curse the very fucking days I landed my eyes on him and when Dad announced our marriage. And on our wedding night, and every bloody night after that, remember when Ino told me that you had hit her and I nearly killed for that? Menma nodded to this one. You were lucky it was an accident, because if you hit her on purpose, and more than once. Wait, you mean Sasuke is beating you? Like, on the regular and during. Especially during it, that is the only way he can do it, often with that cursed mark turned on, and Sakura, that whore, revels in it and even helps him. And it's not just beating, oh no, that bastard has done a lot to me, and when I was finally pregnant with our child, not even that had stopped him. Menma and Kushina, who had also finally took time off of shouting at her husband, paled at the revelation, with Narumi turning to her parents. You think it's cause I'm clumsy, that I'm always in bruises and cuts? Or is that I lost my son on my 6th month because of miscarriage 5 years ago? Oh no, it was that fucking son of a bitch, your son-in-law that did it all, father. And what did you tell me, when I told you about it? You told me to simply endure and make Sasuke happy, you fucking knew what he did to me, and you didn't fucking bothered even to straighten him up. You, my own fucking father, you just took that bastard's word for truth and left me to his mercy. Narumi's eyes were already watered, as she broke down, with her mother already at her side and calming her, before she casted a powerful glare at Minato. Minato, first Naruto, then Narumi, when we get out of her, if those watchers don't kill that bastard and you, I will fucking do it. You sold our own daughter to a maniac, also that you could secure Uchihas for Konoha. But what about our daughter, the one you oh so desperately had tried to protect? Kushina snarled at him, with Minato remaining impassive. Sasuke had promised to me to stop his attitude, and he has, as far as I know. And our daughter had always had a wild imagination, which still hasn't stopped, Minato defended himself, before Narumi shouted at him. That fucking bastard had punched me in the gut, when I was fucking pregnant with my son. And all because he was fucking frustrated with how council doesn't respect his authority. Narumi shouted at him. I was 6 months through already. Do you even fucking care if I live or not, as long as that is loyal to Konoha or not? Wow, I always knew that you were rotten inside, but to this extent, a new voice came in, with all the participants turning their heads to see none other than Anko Mitarashi, dressed in an outfit of a warden herself, with all the armor and cloak, but without a helmet, with her hair now longer and made into a long ponytail, looking at them all, in specific at Narumi. Don't worry girl, that sick and his personal cheering whore are really suffering right, so much so that they wish they could just die. You that Tokubetsu Jonin, partner of Ibiki Morino and Orochimaru's former apprentice, Mitarashi Anko. Minato recognized her, with Anko smirking at Hokage. Did my son also buy you for his own, like he did with Hyuga and some others, when you disappeared? Bought me. I was happy to get out of that hellhole, as were all the others, after you returned. Anko countered. His Imperial Majesty had offered me a pretty title, lands and enough money for life, but I refused, and after I heard of Watchers and what they do, I just couldn't resist joining in. I mean, who wouldn't? High payment, premium equipment, top of the class training, insurance that covers everything, from death at tooth infection to sudden destruction of your house by a goblin rocket, and on top it all off, a chance to learn from the Night Elf Watchers the true art of torturing. Did you know that them lot had been doing what I love to do for 10,000 years straight? Wicked, but if I wasn't on that train the moment I saw what my now chief does on daily basis. Needless to say, I proved to be one damn enthusiastic and successful watcher interrogator. Anko, I know that things weren't all well for you in Konoha, but if you just managed to get my son a message from me, Minato wanted to sway Anko on his side, but it proven to be useless. Ah, sorry there, Lord, but not only is my payment here way higher than in Konoha, but here, they got lots of real friends and a good life, and His Imperial Majesty did everything to get that cursed mark off me and helped with rehabilitation. He is like a little brother, so caring and reliable. Anko smiled kindly, before her smile turned into a wicked one. Alright ladies, time to grab on the new meat. Get me mother-daughter duo out of here, the red-eyed ravenet with those nice legs and great rack, bearded asshole with a smoke in his mouth, pine-assed lazy bun and that perverted virgin with a boner for frogs. Watchers went to the cells, opening them up and dragging the needed people out of them. And careful with that frog boner, he is a legit super pervert, and will do anything to get a panty shot. Not to mention his sadomasochistic tendencies, considering how much women in Konoha beat his in hot springs and he still came back, several times a day at times. Then it is probably a good thing Mistress Maev orders us to wear all this armor and cloak, Mistress Anko. Her aide replied to it, with Anko nodding to this, putting back her helmet. Yeah, it certainly is. Plus it's damn comfy in here as well. Good thing she cares for her subordinates wearing a comfortable uniform. Alright ladies, bring the abused girl and nice rack into 12th cabinet and the rest in 13th cabinet. Anko ordered out, as they went ahead towards the places, with Kushina tugging Anko and stopping her. Please, Anko, I beg you, don't hurt my daughter. I'll take whatever punishment she was ordered to. Anko simply pushed Kushina's hand away and motioned them to move, while she went to the 12th cabinet with Narumi and Kurenai, closing behind her. And nobody even was able to see a dim light, coming from the smallest space between the door and floor. Imperial Gardens. Meanwhile, Gardens of Hinata. This was to be Naruto's present to his first love on their 5th anniversary together, something that Hinata had always wanted to have in their palace. A place, filled with life, flowers and untainted beauty, where she and Naruto could find solitude, to spend time together just for themselves, away from the prying eyes and important matters. A place, where time and matters would not touch them, where Hinata would bring their daughter to play with, their little Himawari. If only Hinata had not answered the call of House of Latrua, she and Himawari would enjoy this place, the gift that Naruto had been preparing for his wife and daughter. But in the end, Hinata never saw this small marvel, this small private world that Naruto had prepared for her. Instead, Naruto and Samiramis with her dragons have made a new garden elsewhere, a garden of ashes and fire, as some call it, right where his beloved had lost her life, and their daughter had lost her mother. Nowadays, Naruto would come in this place in need of finding privacy and to be with his own thoughts, to think of things and remember what had happened. Along with that, he would let the hardened and strong facade of the emperor fall for a little bit and reveal a person, scarred and changed by wars, campaigns, still mourning the loss of his beloved, and happily spending every moment with his children here, along with his wives in a moment of peace. Now was not such moment, for Naruto and Samiramis were waiting for their guests to arrive. And so they did, as a small portal opened up, and from it walked out Kurenai, Narumi and Anko. Naruto let outside a small smile, as he spoke up. Sorry for the little delay and that little spectacle, but it is hardly the time for them to know of our little bond. Naruto smiled to them, with Narumi and Kurenai smiling back to him. Plus Konoha really did piss me off with all this. I'll say, I thought that you were going to kill Minato right there in the spot. Narumi commented with a chuckle. And thanks for getting me out of the cell for a bit. It was starting to get really tense in there. Any time, little sister. Naruto said with care and love to his dear little sister, before bringing her in the embrace, warm and caring. I missed you, Narumi. I missed you too, big brother. Narumi allowed her own facade to fall down and her true nature came out, as she answered to her brother's embrace with her own, with tears of happiness falling down having reunited with her beloved sibling. For most, seeing an emperor hugging a daughter of 4th Hokage and his wife, a container for Kyuubi and a wife to his former rival from the times now ignored and forgotten by many, would have been something of a shock. But to Narumi Namikaze, this was a meeting she was longing for a long time, as it has been over a year since she talked with Naruto in person, and this waiting was hard for her. Especially considering in the fact that Narumi was not like her family and Konoha in a simple, yet completely defying aspect of her character. Narumi, since her childhood, was always one of those children with the curiosity and the need to ask the age-old question, what is right and what was wrong. Growing up in a seemingly loving and caring environment, she and her brother were shaped up by their father to make both of them able to control Kyuubi's power, as well as being loyal and loving towards their homeland, Konoha. Control over Kyuubi, loyalty to family and Konoha, expanding over the natural talents and gifts that they received, those were the main cornerstones in their upbringing. And while Menma took to it all like a fish to the water, Narumi was always more curious and interested in details, so she questioned all that her mind could grasp. Initially, it was seen as a positive thing by her father and mother, a child eager to learn more from her parents. And Minato with Kushina did try to answer it all, but before long, Narumi began to ask questions about first the Kyuubi, why was it imprisoned and why it was evil, which led Minato to talking about her and Kyuubi's importance to Konoha and world peace. At first Narumi accepted this and calmed down, but not long after, she became an unwanted witness to a fight between her mother and father, with the subject being her believed to be dead brother, Naruto. It was then when Narumi learned that she had another brother, and that her parents had left in Konoha, alone, without anyone, and that he was the shield that protected Narumi and Menma, a diversion to prevent all others from hurting them. For Narumi, brought up in the environment of love and care for family, this was a shock, an absolute crush of her beliefs and idealism. She and Menma were told that Naruto was gone the moment he was born, taking with him the soul of Kyuubi and leaving them the power to wield, but now Narumi knew the truth. Parents didn't see her, as she had hid herself away, and soon after that, Namikaze family returned to Konoha, where they were hailed as heroes and saviors. Menma was practically drowning in all this adoration, but Narumi didn't, for all her thoughts were with Naruto and she wanted to meet with him, to talk to him and connect with him. But it was all too late, as he was banished, like a discarded kunai, having served his purpose and now useless, with her mother and father accepting it as something normal, and Menma scoffing at Naruto's memory. But to Narumi, this was another crush of ideals and the reveal of the duplicity and hypocrisy of her family and Konoha. She hid all her growing hatred away and made sure to not show it outright, but she no longer saw her family with the bright colors as before. Her father was a hypocrite, determined to see Konoha on top with Narumi and Menma serving that purpose, ignoring the fact of his betrayal of his own blood. Her mother, who had so fervently and ferociously defended Naruto and spoke about the injustice done to her and him, did nothing to change it all and still remained with Minato, being a loyal and faithful wife to him and still being on his side. And Konoha, Narumi didn't see the ideal place to live in, but a cesspool of betrayal, arrogance and hypocrisy, among which few of those that were truly loyal to true will of fire remained and from whom she learned of what kind of person her brother was. Kind, loyal, brave, headstrong and with a heart so great, that not even the mistreatment of this village could break him, ready to do everything for his village and friends. It wasn't long until Narumi grew to first respect, and then admire her brother. Over years, Narumi only grew in hatred and disgust with Konoha, hiding it away, and she had sought out to get close to her brother's former teammates, hoping that they were still loyal to him as he was to them. Narumi couldn't have been more wrong and she now cursed them and herself for falling in love with Sasuke, being his wife and enduring 8 years of beatings, mistreatment, rape, and even loss of a child, when Minato had dismissed it all and told Narumi to simply keep on the appearances. That was when Narumi understood that to her father, she wasn't as much of a daughter as she was a product for his plans, with Menma not seeing it. And when she had tried to tell her mother the truth of what had happened, Kushina simply said to her child that she was overreacting and that it was normal for Narumi to be feverish, and that Sasuke loved and cared about her. Narumi simply couldn't believe that her mother, after all that had happened to her and how her husband had deceived her, would go out of her way to keep up the appearance of all being well, when she could clearly see it was not like that. Her husband lied to her, Menma was an arrogant and spoiled brat, and Narumi was being abused, raped and nearly killed on several occasions by her own husband. And Kushina, blind and deaf to the pleas of her daughter, kept the appearances, speaking out of the injustices for Naruto, yet siding ultimately with Minato, just to keep their family together. She had failed to realize that there was no family to be saved and salvaged, and Narumi had only hoped that she could have gotten away from this hellhole with Naruto when he did. And suddenly, 3 years ago, just a month after her miscarriage, Kurenai Yuhi had approached her and told Narumi that there were still some people that saw the injustice and corruption towards Naruto and how rotten 4th Hokage was, and even if they were hidden away, they were there, with Kurenai being one of them, and they had someone very powerful who supported them from shadows. And that someone, as soon Narumi found out, was the Emperor of Second Numenor Empire, Naruto, her own dear brother, whom she wished to meet for years, and now did, thanks to his spies and magi, who opened the portal from Konoha to Numenor. Their first meeting was at first awkward and strange, but as they spoke, Narumi and Naruto grew closer as true brother and sister, with Narumi finding comfort in someone who supported her truly. He had confessed to her that for years his spies and agents watched the situation in Konoha and also kept an eye out for her, and that he knew well of her and what had happened to her. Naruto had offered her and some others a way out of Konoha and into his empire, where they could build their lives and live in peace, away from the lies and hypocrisy of Konoha and dangers of shinobi life. The offer was so tempting for Narumi and Kurenai, but they refused, still holding on to some hope for Konoha, loyal to a fault to it, but also because, with their positions so close to power, they decided to inform Naruto of the plans of Konoha. They knew that as an emperor, he watched at Konoha with a careful and threatened even eye, and he wanted to make sure that Konoha would not become a threat to Numenor Empire. Narumi and Kurenai understood it well and respected it, and so they stayed, becoming his ears and eyes in Konoha for 3 years, still in contact and loyal to Naruto, but growing more and more disillusioned and hopeless for Konoha as years had gone by. Especially hard they were for Narumi, with Sasuke's raping and beatings growing more and more violent. And even Narumi had grown to endure it. She soon sought to break away from this circle of hatred, violent hypocrisy, with Kurenai agreeing with her, as her life with Asuma didn't prove to be good for her at all, with her own husband being a duplicitous person on several layers, and only her daughter Mirai and an iron will practically keeping her from becoming the same kind of miserable person as Kushina. But now, both young women were at an end of their endurance and hoped to get out of their personal hell. And they truly held faith that Naruto would help them. As Naruto and Narumi separated, he nodded to Kurenai with a smile, as he spoke up to them. Hope the Watchers weren't too eager in their work. Maiev is a very much capable leader of them, but even I sometimes find her dedication to justice and work to be obsessive, at times. Naruto let out a sigh, as he offered his sister and his friend seats on the benches, which they took, with him and Samiramis sitting down together on the other one. So, Narumi, Kurenai, what was it that you wished to discuss with me in person? Your message said that it was urgent. And from what my independent sources from Konoha told us, there doesn't appear to be any indication of threat from Konoha and Hai no Kuni to Empire and its interests, so this must be something personal. Samiramis noted out, with Narumi and Kurenai looking at Samiramis with surprise, hearing of this for the first time. You have your own spies in Konoha? Narumi asked of her curious, with Samiramis simply nodding at this one. I thought that Naruto only had those of Shadow Guard working there, but he mentioned nothing of your spies there, sister. Narumi, Kurenai, I hope that you do not take any offense to this revelation. The truth of the matter is that Black Dragonflight has its spies all over the world, including the elemental nations, and they were there for ages, long before the man you called God of Shinobi had founded Konoha. Naruto only learned of it after we married, but he kept quiet for me. Samiramis explained to the women. Other dragon flights may be reactionary in nature, but the blacks prefer to prevent catastrophes from happening when there is only seed of it taking root. I learned that lesson well, when my father's madness nearly cost me and my brothers and sisters their sanity and lives. Please do not think that I do not trust humans and other races. I do, and Naruto is most certainly one of a kind husband, but younger races, as I've learned, have a tendency to self-destruction, which I find to be disturbing. When you think about it, we do have it in us. Narumi didn't argue with a far superior in wisdom and experience creature. Anyway, what we wanted to talk about, Naruto, that offer, the one you made to me and Kurenai 3 years ago, does it still stand? Naruto and Samiramis exchanged the looks between each other, before Naruto spoke up, voice as strong and determined as ever. It does, for both of you. Both of the women sighed in relief, with Naruto continuing. I know that you hate to hear this, but I did warn you that you wouldn't be able to do it for long. Especially considering what Asuma and Sasuke really were. Can't blame your sister for trying to repay to you for not being there for you when you needed it most. Narumi argued in her favor, with Naruto shaking his head at this one. She is right, Naruto. Both she and I didn't do anything to help you when we knew we could, and Kurenai had tried to support Narumi, but Naruto stopped them in their tracks. Neither of you hold no debt or any blame for what had happened to me. I know full well who are to blame for what had transpired with me and whom not to, and I do not hold any ill against those that didn't stand up to them. Naruto simply stated to them with full seriousness. And I won't hear any more of your guilt and reasoning. I am getting you out of Konoha for good, and since you now want it, that just makes it a bit easier to do, especially with a blunder that Konoha had just made in here. I know for a fact that it wasn't father's idea to use that genjutsu on you. All he and others had wanted was to get on your and others' good side and make you sway the emperor on Konoha's side. Narumi informed Naruto and Samiramis. It could have been Sasuke, sure, but after what I and others saw with Danzo. That genjutsu was Danzo's handwork, Koto Amatsukami of Shisui Uchiha. Suddenly, from the trees appeared a royal guard, wearing a lighter variant of their armor, with a white katana at his side, with his face being closed by helmet, which muffled his voice a bit. Over 17 years ago, Danzo had orchestrated the destruction of Clan Uchiha, having manipulated Third Hokage and Council into isolating them and provoking them into a rebellion. All of that was so that he could gain the Sharingan and Mangekyo Sharingan, one of which he placed in his right eye socket. His Imperial Majesty was well informed of this for a long time, and I have warned him of the possibility of Danzo using Koto Amatsukami on him. To which my dear wife and Empress, along with all of my Imperial Royal Guards, were most ready. Naruto noted out to them all. Still, I did expect that the moment Minato and others hear about me and my friends being here, odds would be in favor of them manipulating me to their favor. Wouldn't be the first time someone had tried that card on me, and I suspect it won't be the last. Anyway, Anko, what measures have been taken with Danzo? Lady Maev had ordered a complete suppression upon his chakra, surgical removal of that arm and the Sharingan in his eye. After that, he was subjected to our usual program of interrogation and questioning, the usual stuff. Anko replied simply to her emperor. From what the interrogators found out, that arm was transplanted to him with the help of Orochimaru, in order for Danzo to control some strange visual jutsu of Sharingan, which could grant him an immortality of sorts. Izanagi, a genjutsu casted upon oneself at the cost of the casting eye. It rewrites the laws of reality for a limited time, allowing for a person to live after being killed. The guard informed Naruto and Samiramis, as well as others. It is a forbidden among Uchiha's jutsu, among both the eastern and western clans. There are even special punishments for usage of this jutsu, as it is capable of easily corrupting with the illusions of invincibility its users. However, what Danzo has done. There is only one punishment for his crimes and what he had attempted today, and that is death. Samiramis said with strength and no compromises in her voice, turning to Anko. Is Danzo being interrogated still? Yup. By Lady Maev herself in attendance, and it seems like old Sneaky Snake has a lot of secrets to reveal to us, and he isn't through yet. He did try to use some suicidal fuinjutsu to take himself and half the palace with him when we first brought him to question, but good thing that Kaoru had allowed a couple of her people in the Watchers, so the crisis was averted. Anko replied. Should I go back and tell her that he is to be disposed of immediately? No, squeeze out of his mind and body every ounce of information that you can, and after that, throw him into an isolated cell. He will be executed, publicly and in front of Konoha's delegation a day after tomorrow. As for the delegates, you do your duty, Anko. Naruto said to her, with Anko nodding to him. Now, as for getting you two out of Konoha. With the situation as it is, you two can ask for a political protection and safe haven from Konoha, the basis being the mistreatment and violence being used against the two of you, along with the proof of it being provided by you in the interrogation. With those at hand, Konoha and Hai no Kuni won't be able to pressure me or Numenor Empire into giving you back, and with what Danzo pulled out here, they should consider themselves lucky with getting out of this hellhole so easily. Kurenai, I remember that you now have a daughter, and she is also welcomed in here, my mages, and will take care of the getting her into the Empire. Naruto, there is something I would like to ask you to do. Narumi spoke up to her brother, with Naruto nodding to her. Please, extend this offer to our mother as well. Naruto widened his eyes at this one, but said nothing, as he rose up and slowly paced a little, not turning his head to face his sister and others. Kushina Namikaze, she was a very touchy subject for both of the siblings to talk about, with both being biased towards her in their own way. Naruto, much like with Minato, did not believe that she really even cared about his existence, while Narumi had always tried to prove to him that he was wrong in that belief. True, Naruto's views had changed somewhat about Kushina towards better, but he wasn't very much longing for a reunion with her, nor was he impressed with how she had handled the situation with him and what had happened to Narumi. When Naruto had found out about what happened to Narumi from his agents, it was one of the few moments when he had snapped from his simple observation of Konoha and made a move to teach Sasuke a lesson. The next time Sasuke had left the village for a month-long mission, a fully armed company of shadow guards, led by now-present royal guard, had waited for him and captured him. How easy it was to make up a simple A-rank solo mission, to lure Sasuke Uchiha out of Konoha's reach and make him pay. Naruto was not present, but he made sure that his orders were carried out with a complete precision, with Sasuke being left without ability to ever conceive another child, weakened to the point being at the level of a simple chunin and the curse mark now acting more like a slowly growing cancer, only well hidden away and spreading through his body, until Sasuke's all body wasn't infected by it and then destroyed. It wouldn't be long now, miracles of magic and secrets learned from Orochimaru assure it. None knew what had happened with Sasuke, but when he returned, it was clear that he was no longer the mighty Uchiha elite that he was once, though none had dared to speak otherwise. And no one knew that Sasuke Uchiha was already a walking dead man, aside from Naruto. Naruto stopped pacing around and looked at the small patch of flowers in front of him, until he spoke up. You and I have discussed this more than once, Narumi, and you know my opinion about this subject. Naruto said in a cold and somewhat distant voice. She had said many things in my defense, but while her mouth said one thing, her actions spoke otherwise. She knew that I was alive for 2 years before I was banished, and she could have come to me back then, but did not. She could have left Minato and live a life of her own after all that he has done, but didn't. She heard all the rumors and stories about your mistreatment by Sasuke, especially from you, and what she did. Naruto said with strength and fire in his eyes. Narumi, I can understand your desire to help your mother, but after all that had happened, do you really think that she deserves this mercy? Naruto, I know how much you despise and even hate, I can understand that too. But you also need to understand that for her, our family is all that she has left. Narumi argued with him. She had lost her own clan, most of her friends and much more. Our father was there for her and with her for decades, and she had raised me and Menma, all in hopes of having something that she had lost: family. And to keep that family alive, she would go to any lengths. The family that she so wishes to have and protect has long fallen apart, and she knows it. Naruto argued back to his sister. Menma, arrogant brat that abuses his position of a hero, with Ino and that second wife of his indulging him. Minato, with his world conquest plans as well as prophecies of the toads, believing he is to be a messiah for all, who ignores all morals and laws of men for his own ambitions. And then there is you, Narumi. She isn't concerned with saving and protecting her family, as she is obsessed with preserving this fickle illusion of perfection she had built in her mind, that all is well and won't break it. And even though she had heard what you said back in the cell, do you really think that she will do anything to protect you? Naruto asked of his sister, surprising her. All of our cameras are outfitted with listening and observing spells, making sure to prevent escapes from being plotted. Samiramis answered on the silent question for her husband, before turning to face her husband herself. Naruto, my love, I know and understand your resentment towards your mother, and I had faced the same, as you know. And while my mother had refused to listen to reason, her madness was assured by my father and his powers. I think that your mother may yet be redeemed. She was honest and sincere in her desire to be with you and in protecting you, and while her actions may speak otherwise, deep down she must understand that her current life can't very well continue for long. I do not know why she still keeps on the appearances, but I do know that there are those people, that in acts of desperation and to preserve even a ghostly appearance of their well-being, they will go so far as to ignore even the obvious. They are so desperate, that are unable to see that this illusion has become their own torment, and will not see the ways out of that twisted circle, unless someone shows it to them directly. You know that, do you not, my love? Naruto, I do not ask you to forgive and accept her, but, for the sake of your sister and for me, please. Samiramis knew that her husband may have his moments of rashness and fury, but even he can be swayed when need be, and she knew how to do so. Naruto looked at his wife for a few long moments, before turning away from them for a bit and thinking to himself about it all. As much as he might have despised Kushina, he could not ignore the reasoning of his sister and wife. In desperation, people will wear whatever mask to hide away their scars and to protect themselves from the harsh and cruel reality. He himself has done so for years in Konoha, and Kushina appeared to be the same way, only even worse in her case, considering that Minato was possibly the only close person ever to her, with her family also being all that she had for herself. Even though she had suffered so much cruelty, deceit and more, Naruto wouldn't pass it his father to influence her through their connection, as well as her own desperation for making things right for her family, or the majority of it. After all, sacrificing him did secure Narumi and Menma, from a practical point of view. Still, Kushina's desire to ignore all the wrong in front of her and dismiss it was troubling, but was he not the same way? He was, but what she did with Narumi, it was something that he could not ever ignore nor forgive, for hurting his sister like that, by letting her delusions take over her mind like that. He won't forgive her so easily, nor will he ever forget, but, maybe. Letting out a sigh, Naruto turned back them and spoke up. Anko, arrange for Narumi and Kushina a time alone in one of the cabinets in dungeons. Anko nodded to him, with Naruto turning to his sister. Break the news to her. Tell her that if she really wants to, she can stay here, in Numenor. However, should she use her position to help out Hino Kuni or Konoha in any way, I will not be merciful towards her, not after all that had happened. Explain it to her, sister, because I don't think that I am yet ready to speak with her, without hurting her. Narumi smiled to Naruto and nodded to him. Itachi, please escort our guests to a dining room. I imagine that they did not have their supper. Itachi nodded to Naruto and led Narumi and Kurenai through the gardens, while Anko teleported back into the twilight cells, with Naruto sitting back on the bench with his wife, shaking his head. You knew exactly what to say to me, just to make me think, didn't you? Naruto looked at his smiling wife, who merely shrugged at the suggestion, but did not lose her smile one bit. Well, it is my duty as your wife to sometimes rain wisdom and mercy upon you, my love. And with how stubborn you can be at times, it is no wonder that I require additional help with you. Samiramis joked a little, with Naruto chuckling a little at that one. Naruto, you know that it is only for the better to give Kushina a chance, let her see that there is life without Minato and Menma, without desperation and half-insane denial. A life without a mask, the one that you had always wanted for yourself. I know, Samiramis. But, sometimes the masks grow onto your skins and become inseparable from your real face. I remember how badly it was with me, when Uther just took me in. Naruto sighed as he remembered, before he turned to look in his wife's eyes. Tell me, why did you side with Narumi this time? When I first told you of how she acted, you were almost furious enough to turn back in your dragon form and go to Konaha and have words with her, but now. Let it be known, that I do admit that I am prone of letting lose my temper, at times. Samiramis admitted, though with the smallest of blushes. But, with what Narumi had told me and everything that had happened with us, I couldn't stop thinking about Kushina's situation and comparing it with what had happened with my mother. Samiramis grew a little sad, before Naruto had hugged his wife caringly, remembering how bad it was for his wife to face against her. I remember how kind and caring she was, but also how very devoted to my father she was as well. So devoted and loyal, that his way was the only one for her, a blinding loyalty with desperation, the same one as with Kushina. And whenever I think about it, I can't stop thinking that if I had been more proactive, if I had showed her the wrong Neltharion had committed, and then perhaps she wouldn't have gone mad and done so much wrong. Perhaps, I could have avoided it altogether, instead of dealing with it just a few years ago. I see where you are coming from, Samiramis. Naruto sighed, holding his wife close to him. I'll give Narumi a chance, and if Kushina agrees, then maybe I'll change my opinion of her, but do not bet on it so easily. Samiramis simply chuckled at this one, while Naruto softly put a hand upon her belly. And how does our little baby girl doing? Is she already making her presence known? You know as well as I do that she is still too early for that. Samiramis simply shook her head at this. You remember when I was having our first child, Naruto. I might have shortened the process of pregnancy with my physiology, but it still took 6 months for him to come to life, and now I am barely through the first one. I know, but you know how I get with our children, do you not? Naruto smiled to Samiramis, with merely laughed, recalling just what a soft and doting father to his children Naruto was. And I still have not forgiven you, milady, for Demon's accelerated growth, Naruto half-jokingly stated to her, with Samiramis pouting a little and puffing up her cheeks as she answered to him. It is not my fault that children of dragons and humans grow up so fast, and had I wanted to staunch his growth, I could only do so through magic, and we both would never do something like that. Samiramis was serious on this one, before spoke more softly to her husband. Naruto, we have consulted Alexstrasza and she confirmed that Demon's growth is natural for one of his origin, especially for a child of an aspect. His mind and body both grew without any trouble. For Dragon, Demon is still a hatchling, with the body of a grown human and a formed mind. And let us be honest, when compared to how Targaryens have called their children, dragons, our little dragon turned out to be just a marvelous child, and do not even dare to deny it. I would never. Whom do you take me for? Naruto chuckled at this one with his wife. I think I'm just sad that I saw our son grow up so fast. Just some 8 years ago I held in my arms and now he is of my height and I can't help but see in him not a small boy, but a grown man, one that already makes me proud. Is this even normal, for a father not being able to see his son as a small boy like he once was? For all parents it is sad, not just for you, but to me as well. Samiramis admitted. He has everything to be a great emperor after you, but I sometimes can't help but remember how he was just learning to make his first steps, or how he first talked to us, and now he is already out there, traveling the Westerosi kingdoms, learning of the Empire and its subjects as well as doing his duty to the Empire. I sincerely hope that he did not learn any bad habits from their king. Light knows that Bor has more of those than my father has prayers for each of the sins. Naruto shook his head at this one. Good thing that Alexstrasha's granddaughter is accompanying him. Those two will be alright together, two children of human and a dragon. Yes, Urza was very persistent to accompany Demon, almost as much as Irene with me to share you. Samiramis brought it up to her husband with a small wicked smile of her own. Young dear was always very much fond of our boy, and now, both are physically grown and beautiful, strongly connected since their childhoods. Perhaps we should prepare the court for the news of heir to the throne soon marrying the legendary Titania of Redflight. We first need to prepare them for the news of you being with a child, my beloved Empress. Naruto reminded her, with Samiramis chuckling to it. I wouldn't be surprised if the suitors for her were to show up the moment it was announced of a new princess soon being born. Remember how it was with Demon? Better not remind me of that, though now he has Urza to scare all those harlots away. Samiramis and Naruto laughed at this one. I still can't believe the gall of that Tully woman from a year ago, to push for a match between our boy and her daughter, speaking to me as if she were my own mother. Those Tullys seem to have the mind of their Sigil, the trout. But, at least she was being modest, unlike that Lannister woman. Samiramis remembered with disgust Cersei and her husband, as well as the rest of Lannister family. That you are right, my beloved Empress. Naruto kissed her on the cheek. Now, milady, I believe that it is time for our supper. I hear that the cook is serving your favorite for the supper. Samiramis looked at her husband with a smile and rose up with him, going with him towards the dining room and leaving any and all bad thoughts behind. Meanwhile, Westerosi Kingdoms. King's Landing. Red Keep. King's Landing, a proud capital of the former Seven Kingdoms, of which Reach and Dorne had been subjugated and integrated into a second Numenor Empire to the south, leaving only 5 kingdoms in the hold, without a real, complete independence. When Emperor Naruto had proclaimed the official formation of the Second Numenor Empire 5 years ago, an enemy to the north had risen up, to the north of Angmar, Gilneas and Lordaeron, intent to claim more lands into his own domain. That enemy was Robert Baratheon, the king of the Andals, first men, Rhoynar and protector of the realm of 7 kingdoms, who had crushed the previously ruling House Targaryen, and now was eager for more conquest, past Dorne and those 3 kingdoms that laid to the south of it, namely Angmar and Lordaeron. Robert had amassed a host of nearly 80,000 men, believing that he would be easily victorious against, whom he called, an upstart blonde prick so green, he pissed grass. However, what he did not count for was the fact that the same boy whom he underestimated wasn't as gullible or easily scared, nor was he stupid. Second Numenor Empire, unlike all other countries, relied on a regular army, professionally trained and equipped, stationed in parts throughout its regions and on the borders, with 5 legions, a main unit of the empire, numbering 10,000 men and women of infantry, 3,500 cavalry and 50 mages of various spheres in each legion, being stationed at the border with Dorne and Reach. Westerosi kingdoms did not hold any magical users in their ranks, being of more superstitious beliefs and conservative towards it and other races, while Numenor and Eriador had an abundance in magical users of all calibers, with Empire bringing their full might into the defense of its borders, along with other races contributing their own forces to the cause. Robert had started a war when he invaded Angmar to his direct south of Dorne, hoping to easily break through the guarding keeps and move towards Lordaeron to the west and south towards the center of the empire. However, he underestimated the strength of the legions and their commanders, all of whom were just recently blooded and tested during the Great War, along with Magi proving invaluable in supporting armies through portals or with healing. Along with that, the strongholds and keeps that were on Robert's path were not very easily taken, with garrisons holding to the last man and not surrendering, and even breaking through the walls took considerable effort on Westerosi's part. By the time second month of the campaign rolled in, Robert was only done with 2 forts and had laid the siege to another 3, with his army already thinning out to 70,000 strong. As Marshal of North, Tyrion Fordring wisely used his legions and struck at Robert's weaker parts of his great army. He also made use his elite corps of High Elf Rangers, raiding Robert's supply lines and even venturing into Westerosi kingdoms to divert the attention of Robert's forces. This had stalled Westerosi king long enough in his place for 2 more months, for the real imperial army, numbering 90,000 strong, with Emperor leading them, to strike back at Robert Baratheon with his overwhelming numbers of 140,000 men. The Battle of Ironfield was the second major defeat that Robert Baratheon had suffered, but it would prove to be a decisive one for him, as his army had been broken apart and destroyed by superior forces. Naruto himself had faced off against King Robert, who by then was already a near obese man, and defeated him in single combat, but did not kill. Casualties for Naruto's forces were around 6,000 dead and 9,000 wounded, while Robert Baratheon had lost 57,000 men dead and another 10 as captives. After that crushing defeat, Reach and Dorne both rebelled against King Robert Baratheon, the former because House Tyrell saw the power of the empire and wished to be spared from the wrath of Emperor, while the latter with House Martell was eager to avenge the deaths of Elia Martell and her children. Naruto accepted both of the kingdoms into the fold of his empire, but on his own terms, which were actually well received by Tyrells and Martells. In the following 7 months, Naruto had systematically eliminated Robert's ability to raise another powerful army against him, having taken Stormlands and Westerlands, before he laid siege and took King's Landing. The city was considered to be strong enough to withstand an army the size of 100,000 at full garrison and additional forces in it, and Robert had amassed 30,000 strong in there, while Naruto only brought 55, seemingly not enough to take the city, while the rest of his forces already were taking Riverrun and moving to Vale of the Errands. However, with him were 600 magi and 500 cannons, dwarven marvels of siege warfare, freshly transported with a full division of dwarf specialists knowing how to use them. For 5 hours those cannons and magi pummeled the landing's walls and its defenders, until King Robert hadn't decided to bring the fight to Naruto and rode out with 2/3 of his forces towards him, hoping to crush them while they were of fewer numbers, but instead of doing that, they were absolutely obliterated by the might of magi and artillery, before being finished off by Naruto's army. After that, and having been convinced by his retainers, wife in his hand, Robert sought the peace and capitulated. Naruto was considerably merciful to the invader. Reach and Dorne were integrated into the Second Numenor Empire. Westerosi kingdoms were to pay 20 million golden dragons, their main currency, and to become client states of Second Numenor Empire, with Naruto now being the Lord Protector of 5 kingdoms. A merciful outcome, which nonetheless had plunged now 5 kingdoms into an absolute hellhole of an economic crisis, making them completely dependent on the trade and relations with empire itself, while Reach and Dorne saw a great rise in prosperity, wealth and influence as subjects to emperor. This had caused tensions between the Westerosi kingdoms, ruling dynasty and Second Numenor Empire, but the lesson was well learned and remembered, and the fact that if another war were to happen with them, they would be crushed, was not ignored. So, biting their tongues, Robert Baratheon and his wife had to now contend with the presence of Demon Pendragon, prince of the Second Numenor Empire and heir to the throne, now being here on behalf of his father, and discussing the terms of the contributions being paid to his empire, along with some other matters of significant importance. Demon, though just 8 years of old in time, was in physical sense, fully grown and having reached his physical adulthood at age of 5. He stood at the same as his father's height, possessing messy and spiky black hair and golden eyes, a face of his father, strong build and dressed in black with gold. He wore a black and gold coat over a white shirt, with pants and boots being made in similar fashion, with a sword with black handle being attached to his left side. Though he was young, as a demi-dragon, he was educated, smart and not so easily swayed to any side, possessing the will and clarity of mind, both of which were gifts of his mother and father. Trusted and loved by his subjects and his family, Demon took up the responsibilities of a prince and carried himself with dignity, with which he was now standing before the empty Iron Throne, made of 1,000 swords forged together in the flames of Aegon Targaryen's dragon. At his side stood a beautiful young woman of his own age, with long red hair, black eyes and dressed in plate armor with a blue skirt. She was Demon's closest friend, companion and, if his parents were to allow, his wife-to-be, Urza Belsarion, stepdaughter to the Emperor through his third consort, Irene Belsarion, a red dragon and a daughter of Alexstrasza. Demon and Urza heard the steps behind them and turned, seeing Cersei Lannister and her eldest son, Joffrey Baratheon, approaching them. Even though it was not the first time they saw each other, it still surprised Demon how smug and arrogant the Lannisters carried themselves, along with how incredibly alike Joffrey looked with his uncle. Almost as if Joffrey was his son instead of Robert's. Your Imperial Highness, Lady Urza, you weren't expected to arrive. Cersei spoke to them, with a bow from her and her companions, with Demon and Urza nodding to them. What brings a young man like you in King's Landing, especially not informing with a prior notice? Certain things that need clarification, Your Grace. Demon spoke with strength and resolve, not being the least intimidated by her. As you are well aware, since Westerosi kingdoms are the official client state of Second Numenor Empire, your realm is charged with paying war reparations, payment of which has come to a halt. Considering the fact that I was in Dorne, visiting Prince Doran, I have decided to personally investigate this sudden occurrence. Perhaps you could clarify as to why this has happened, along with other things, before I meet with your husband and small council. My husband is away on the hunt, so I doubt you will be meeting him any time soon, and as for the debt, I am afraid I do not know why this has suddenly happened, but I do believe that it is only a temporary halt. Cersei stated to Demon, who simply nodded at this one. Are you for long to King's Landing? Perhaps I could invite you to a dinner with my children and me. I am sure a man of your standing would love to dine in company such as ours. A tempting offer, but one that I must refuse. Demon replied to Cersei, surprising her. I am here on official business, and I do plan on leaving as soon as the matter has been successfully resolved, though it would appear that I will not find much solution here. Demon said to Cersei, confusing her. Whilst I was in Dorne, certain rumors have reached me. Rumors of a civil war already being waged between your House Lannister and House Tully of Riverrun, and that King and his hand do nothing to prevent it. I believe you can understand that if such thing is happening out here, the Emperor will have to take action to stabilize this region, if King Robert Baratheon is incapable of as much. Your Imperial Highness, I can assure you that this conflict was started with Lady Catelyn Stark imprisoning my brother, Tyrion, for no good reason, and my father is trying to rescue him. I am sure that if you inform your father of this detail, Cersei, seeing a chance of swaying a young prince and his empire to the side of the Lannister, wished to use it, but was interrupted by Urza. And what about Hand of the King being attacked by your twin brother in broad daylight? I understand that your younger brother has been abducted by his wife, but still, to commit such a capital crime and get away with it. Had it been Hand of the Emperor attacked in such a manner, the attacker would lose his head within an hour, regardless of his status. Urza noted out, with Joffrey taking turn to speak. Who gave you, a peasant girl, the right to speak here? Joffrey arrogantly asked of her, with Urza not being the least intimidated. Do you even know who we are, girl? And as for that fool Stark being attacked, he brought it upon himself, by covering up for his bitch wife and denying my uncle to comply with the wishes of his superior. Your companion seems to be in need of learning some lessons of courtesy, Your Imperial Highness. To address us in such a manner is quite normal, considering that in status she is equal to me, being a recognized member of Imperial family and de facto, higher than you in status. Demon reminded, as he turned to face Joffrey. And you should properly educate your own son in matters of courtesy. With such a mouth and manner of speaking, he would not make a popular king. Ignoring the pitiful glare that Joffrey had sent him, Demon turned back towards Cersei. Now, if nothing else. Actually, Prince Demon, there is actually something that I would like to talk to you, if you have a moment. Demon decided to listen to what Cersei had to say. I believe you have already heard rumors that my eldest son is already betrothed to Sansa Stark of Winterfell, daughter of Ned Stark. Yes, I have heard about it. If you recall, 2 years ago, during the Tournament of Unification, there were talks about uniting the houses of Pendragon and Baratheon through a marriage, between your parents and my husband with my father. Cersei reminded him, while your parents in public had dismissed our proposal, it is still achievable. I can assure, that if you convince your father to a match between your sister, Lady Rhys Belsarion, and my son, Prince Joffrey, the Crown and Lannisters will not forget your kindness, and as you know, Lannisters always pay their debts, and such a debt will be in no need of payment, because there will be a freezing cold day in Dorne before I bring this proposal before my father. Demon stated, with strength and resolve, surprising Cersei and Joffrey. Your Grace, if you think that I do not know what Game of Thrones is, you are sadly mistaken, and I am also very well aware that your house and father have nothing that could sway me. And I have no desire to be a part of your court games. My business here is clear and straight, and I intend to carry it through and be on my way out of here. Your Imperial Highness, the small council has assembled and is waiting for you. A servant has informed Demon and Urza, as he came in.